You are listening to UpTalk with Sean Conahan. The gloves are off, and it's time to have a chat.
Hello, people. Thanks for joining me for episode 20 of UpTalk Podcast. I really appreciate you taking the time. As always, this episode is brought to you by my awesome sponsors, the Compass Rose Health and Wellness Center in Bedford, Life Shield First Aid and Medical Training out of Halifax, Dan Sun Photography, check him out, and our title sponsor for this year has been Project Trauma Support. For me, a truly life-changing program. If you don't know anything about them, please check them out at projecttraumasupport.com. And before we get started, as always, a trigger warning for those of you who have trigger issues. Just make sure you're in a really good headspace before you listen to the podcast, as there will be difficult subject matter that may trigger you, so just make sure you're in a good place so you can get the most out of it. My guest to this episode is my good friend Janice Landry, who is a very well-respected journalist, writer, public speaker. She does an immense amount of work for the mental health movement and for first responders in general. We're going to talk about her new book, The Legacy Letters, as well as how she handles being around all this trauma all the time, speaking about it and meeting with groups about it. It was a great chat as always. Love talking to Janice. Hope you enjoy it. Let's get to it. Welcome back to the podcast, Janice. Thank you for being here.
Sean, it's just a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm really happy to talk to you about what we're going to chat about today. And again, thanks for taking the time. If people maybe didn't listen to the first episode, and by the way, if you haven't, you need to go back and listen to that. You should, and then come to this, but that's okay. But for those of you that didn't, for those people that didn't, what is how did you grow up? Just a little bit about your upbringing.
I grew up for most of my childhood in a seaside community called Purcell's Cove, which is, about a 15 or 20 minute drive right out of the downtown of Halifax. Right. And it's, there's a lot of fishing boats, and my uncle had a lobster fishing boat, and so I really spent a lot of my formative years outside. At the time I was Perfect. One of those kids where we were outside till somebody called you in to eat. We played on the shoreline, exploring, and we would go in the woods and make forts, go awesome. Blueberry picking. So being outside today, it's kind of a really important message because right. I think people need to find an outlet for stress. And one of mine is just the outdoors. I'm immediately happier if I'm outside.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really important point for sure.
I think so. And I mean, in this new book, one of the chapters, there's a gentleman by the name of Al Twinton. And Al, he unfortunately passed away from an illness just a few weeks before the book, my newest book, The Legacy Letters, was published. And right. He's one of the contributors. And one of Al's main messages, and, I'm trying to honor his memory in doing my public speaking about the book, right. was Al was a musician. And he was a bass trombone player, and he played in military bands across Canada for decades. Right. And his outlet, he was a person that worked around trauma and various responder roles for many years. He worked in the military, and he's worked at airports and all kinds of emergency communications, different things. And he always used music as an outlet for his stress. And that was one of the big messages in his chapter that readers will see, is if you're a person that's going to be around trauma, working repeatedly around trauma over many years, you do need to have a healthy outlet to balance the negative with something beautiful. And for him, the beautiful was music.
Huh. Absolutely. Now, Janice, growing up, tell us a little bit about your father.
My dad was a former Halifax firefighter, and he served for 31 years, and he retired in 1988. And there was a couple of incidents on the job where my dad almost lost his life. And one of those I've gone into detail about in the very first book in this series. And really, the reason I got into all of this was to honor my late father, and he died in 2006. And he and his brothers saved an 8-week-old baby boy from a really terrible house fire here in Halifax back in 1978. And Dad went into that fire without a breathing apparatus, and he made this crazy entry hanging off the gutter system of the home, and he almost died. He and the baby almost died in the fire, and that's why that book is called The 60-Second Story. And when I Googled one day, what happened was, Sean, I Googled my dad's name once, and nothing came up, and I thought, well, wait a second now. Halifax has the oldest fire service on record in Canada.
Right.
And my dad is the first Halifax firefighter to receive the Medal of Bravery from the Canadian government in more than 250 years. Wow. So his story is nationally, historically significant in Canadian firefighting history. So I kind of made it a bit of a mission to tell his story, and not just his, though, because Dad was super, super duper humble. And most people didn't know his story till after he died when I started telling it.
Right.
And he would have wanted me to tell the story of his peers, his brothers. At the time, when he was in the fire service early on, when he joined in the 50s, there were no female firefighters. Of course there are now, and it's brothers and sisters in arms. And, so he would have wanted me to tell the story of all of those people. So as the books go by, you'll notice that I keep expanding out my focus to include more and more emergency response personnel across Canada. And I do that for my dad too, because that's exactly what he would have wanted me to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you touched on it. So it's pretty, obvious to say that you grew up very close to, connected to the first response community. Now I'm sure looking back, growing up with your dad, you probably have a lot of insights now looking back, knowing what you know now, but you were very close to it growing up, connected to it.
Yeah, big time. And I mean, I have a really huge amount of respect for the fire service and all people that head towards the emergency while the rest of us are trying to get out of there. People like yourself, Sean. I mean, I try to honor those people every day because in my opinion, they deserve as much thanks and gratitude and support as we can give them. And, I remember we're heading into the holiday season, and I remember one Christmas my dad attended at a scene where there were children who sadly did not make it out of a fire. And I was too young. I didn't know, but I can tell you this. I know as an adult, we didn't celebrate Christmas on Christmas Day that year. We had it another day. I didn't know the difference. I was a kid. Right. But, you can have as much training and experience in the world, but, hey, we're not machines here. You can't turn a switch on and off. And, my heart goes out to all the people who work around emergency response. And when you talk with them, and I've spoken with dozens and dozens of people over the years, they're all, many cases are terrible. But when you bring children into the mix, those are the ones that really seem to be etched into the psyche of so many of the people I talk to.
Absolutely. And you as well, I mean, you are an essential cog in this machine, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. We're going to put that aside for a minute. But you mentioned, obviously, the 60-Second Story, which was the first book in the series. Then The Price We Pay came. And then what gave you the motivation, or what was the intent of the new book, The Legacy Letters?
It actually came from a conversation I had with Mr. Vince Savoya. And Vince, as you know, Sean, Vince as well, is the founder and head of the Temacontra Memorial Trust. And the trust is the largest support group for emergency personnel in Canada and their loved ones. And I had interviewed Vince Savoya for my second book, The Price We Pay. And I didn't know Vince well at the time. I know him much better now. But at the end of the interview, he turned the tables on me. Darn it. Yeah. And he asked me, he said, Janice, how are you doing? And I'm going to be honest with you. No one ever asked me that question before in my entire life. And I said, Vince, I'm good. But I actually went away and gave his question a lot of really hard thought for a number of weeks and months. And I realized I had spent 12 years as a television reporter, and many of those years as a crime reporter working around very horrific scenes.
Right.
And of course it has impacted me. I don't have PTSD, for the record, but it would be impossible to work around very traumatic scenes in any role and not say that you've been impacted or shaped by it in some way. So I felt that for the many first responders and people who've spoken to me over the years very candidly about their own lives, that I owed it to people to tell them that, hey, you know what? Maybe not exactly where you are, but believe me, I've been around a lot of trauma, and it's definitely impacted who I am.
Oh, yeah, there's no way that it couldn't. It has to. And then, so tell us a little bit about the Legacy Letters. about the book itself.
So what happened was I started by going back to where I started really in the business in television in the late 80s and early 90s.
Right.
And during that time, there'll be a number of your listeners who will remember there were a lot of cases in Nova Scotia of missing young girls or murdered young girls. And I ended up covering most of those. And those cases have really stayed with me for decades, a couple of decades. And I actually think about the people just as much now as I did before. And I do carry them with me, the victims and their loved ones all the time. And I really wanted a piece to be able to honor those families and to show them and others impacted by trauma that we truly do care about them and that we don't forget. So I decided to pick a couple of the cases where I got to know some of the family members quite well. And one of them is a girl from British Columbia by the name of Andrea King. And Andrea flew to Nova Scotia and went missing from the airport here in Halifax. And so there was a search on for her for almost a year, and sadly her remains were found in woods in Lower Sackville. And I got to know her family very well during the search for Andrea, and then afterwards, sadly, when she had to be buried and there was a memorial here and so on. And I reached out to her mom after 2 decades, and I really worried. Her name's Ann King, Andrea's mother.
Yeah.
And it was very difficult to do that because I didn't want to upset the families. But as a journalist, you can't ethically start talking about these cases and not, you have to balance the journalism and give the family a chance to speak, obviously.
Right.
But secondly, you wouldn't want a piece to come out and them go, well, wait a second, Janice never told us she was working on this. Why wouldn't she do that? Right. Well, of course I would. So, I called Anne in British Columbia, and I hadn't talked to her in literally 2 decades. Wow. And Sean, honestly, the first thing she said to me, she remembered who I was. I didn't think she would. And she said to me, how can I help you? Whoa. And given everything she's been through, she's still trying to help other people, which blew me away.
That's a crazy statement to make right off the bat. Yeah.
It is. I mean, you could say, she could be saying, well, why are you calling me? Or who are you? But no, it was, how can I help you? So I did a series of interviews with Anne that you'll read in the Legacy Letters.
Right.
And in that conversation, she said to me that she had regretted not thanking the people on the East Coast for all of the support that her family had received, initially after Andrea went missing and then after she was found. And she was found by a hunter in the woods. Right. And so I offered in that moment, which was it's just a heart-wrenching moment, obviously. There's no real words to put down in black and white what this was like. I tried to explain how emotional this was, speaking with Anne. And I said, Anne, why don't you write a letter, and you can write it to whomever you want and say whatever you want, and I'll ensure that it's printed verbatim in the piece. And that's how the concept for the Legacy Letters was born. Anne King originally offered to write the first letter, and you'll read her letter in there. Yeah. And I went back. I had already started doing the research, so I had to go back to other participants to say, this is a concept I'm developing. Would you also contribute a letter? And they all agreed to readily. There wasn't me trying to convince anyone. They were like, yes, we would love this opportunity. Because, Sean, part of my messaging here is, and I think your listeners will understand this, people impacted by trauma, no matter their relationship or profession, have lost some degree of control over a particular situation, correct?
Right. Absolutely, yeah. For sure.
So this was my small way of giving them something to do to give them total control over exactly what they wanted to say. And I must say there are 15 letters in the book. They are written by various people from across Canada, 2 different specific individuals or groups of people. And, I never thought of it as a time, but I actually asked them a really difficult thing to do, because what exactly would you say if somebody allowed you to say whatever you wanted to? So it's a tough ask, and they really, really stepped up to the plate. And I have to say how humbled I am to not only interview the people, but then be entrusted with these letters to pass on to members of the public. And all of these people have done this in a common thread, and the common thread is they're revisiting trauma across relationships and professions to try to help other people and educate them and support them.
Yeah, and it doesn't get more personal than a letter when you think about it.
I agree, and they're not handwritten letters, of course. These people are across Canada. They emailed me the letters. But you're right. You had to sit at your computer and compose something incredibly personal that you knew many people would read. And when people read the letters, you'll see the common theme of hope and support. And of course, one of our main pushes nationally in Canada is a hashtag a lot of people are saying, "You are not alone." Right. And this book is right in there with that. It's my part of that hashtag messaging to people that reading it, that the feelings you might be having, they're not really abnormal. You're just a typical person like the rest of us that's faced something that's very, very traumatic. And you know what? You're a human being. Yeah. So don't beat yourself up over it. You know, of course things are over the years might impact you. I'm not saying, to be clear to listeners, that everybody working around trauma is going to be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. No, that is absolutely not the case. Everybody is an individual. However, self-care is very important if you're going to be a person that's working around trauma repeatedly for many, many years.
Right. Absolutely. And you know what? And you brought me perfectly into what I wanted to ask you about next, because even though you have never worked in a first response industry, because of your work and your work as a crime reporter and what you're doing now, you are constantly hearing stories of trauma and, you know, over and over and over again, really big stories of trauma, which can, as we know, also impact just as much as if you were there in some cases. So, Janice, what do? You touched on it about being outside. What do you do for self-maintenance, or to take care of yourself so that, you don't fall into that trap?
I think, that's an excellent question. And I think working on this piece has been a very big step for me. Right. I remember being in my living room realizing that Vince Savoya was right when he asked me the question, because he instinctively knew that as a person who was a storyteller who devoted themselves to working around traumatic situations, right, that would eventually rub off on you, because how can you not, care about these people? Yes, you can be trained as a journalist, you can be trained as a 911 dispatcher, you can be trained as a paramedic or a police officer or a detective or whatever. Right. However, at the end of the day, you go home and have your supper with your family, and you're as human as anybody else. Right. So I think it's almost preposterous to think that you could do this and I'm 30 years in. I'm 30 years as a journalist this year. Right. And this piece I did strategically to mark my 30th year to say, you know what? At this stage of my career, if there's anything that I can do to help these families or other people working around trauma to support them, I am going to do that.
Yeah, and we thank you for it. And you mentioned for you the outside is a big relaxation area for you. You try to get outside a lot. Is there anything else that you try to put into your daily or weekly routine that is just to keep you, at a good level?
Yeah, I love music. I listen to music like, Al, I mentioned earlier. I listen to music every single day of my life. Right. A big thing for me, and it's no small potato, are my family and my friends. And right. I have a very large group, actually, of friends, and then a very small group of friends I've known for decades. And there are certain mentors in that group that help me develop these story ideas. I bounce things off them all the time. That includes the late Bill Jessam, who was an iconic storyteller and author from Cape Breton, right, who passed away a number of years ago. People like Bill and some of my other close friends, my husband and daughter, these people are so important to me because, like my father, he was my biggest supporter, right, by far. But I always knew these people had my back. And I'm a mom now, and I think that our relationships with other people are hugely important. So I'm very social. I love to be around my friends and family. Right. But I also need alone time, and I think it's important for people it's okay to just be alone with yourself in the house, put some music on. Some people like to cook. I like to eat, Sean. You can cook it. I'll eat it.
I like to eat too. Shockingly, for everybody listening, I do like to eat.
I love to go out for a nice meal. Something like that. So I think having relationships with people, for me, I love to travel. I love to be by the ocean. Some days I'll just drive by the ocean and just to, walk by the water or listen to the sound of the waves, things like that. But I think our relationships with people are a huge part of that because, it's so easy to turn away when you're having a hard time. Right. And again, it's good to have alone time too, but not to try. And I realize, again, from speaking with many people, there are many times you just want to shut yourself away. Yeah. But those people, they want to be there for you. And maybe just trying to open the lines of communication a little bit to say, I'm having a bad day. I just need some time to myself. Right. Just, what I'm saying? Balance. Yeah. Balance is key.
Oh, for sure. What kind of music do you listen to? What's your favorite kind of music?
Honest to God, I listen to everything. I love music, and because my husband loves country music. Yeah. He plays drums. Actually, we have a drum set in our family room. But I listen to rock. I love Nat King Cole. I will listen to Rush, Tragically Hip. I will listen to everything. Honestly, there's so many different bands that I love. I love the Mavericks. I could literally go on and on and on with
music. I'm with you because music is really important to me as well. I grew up in a musical family. My dad in the Valley was part of a really popular country rock group in the Valley that used to tour the Valley, all the Valley bars when I was young. And I remember being at their practices, and music was just entrenched in me then. And I can understand totally how powerful music can be.
It's true, and I actually, when no one's here, listen, Sean, this is an exclusive. I play a mean air guitar.
Do you really?
I'm telling you, oh yeah, you could see me when there's no one in this house with the music cranked and playing, like going around like I'm the next whoever. It's hysterical. I'm serious though. You've got to have fun. And actually, part of that is I love humor. Yeah. I love any kind of comedy. I love movies. I'm kind of a movie nut, so I love to sit back, with a thing of popcorn and my husband and daughter and watch a movie. But humor for me is a big one. Anybody with a good sense of humor. My husband's one of the funniest people I know. We have a lot of really funny friends. Yeah. I love humor. That's also a good one, a good outlet for me.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's a must-have. Have you ever gone for a float?
No, what's that?
Oh, dude, Janice.
What is it?
We're going to get you on a float. So, the Compass Rose Health and Wellness Center in Bedford. I don't know if you know of it. It's right there by the 102 and the Hammonds Plains Road.
Yes, I know what you mean.
There's a little white building where the credit union is. Anyway, they're in there. So, they're a full-service health and relaxation place that sponsors the podcast, and they have float tanks in there. So they're also known as a sensory deprivation tank because
I know exactly what you're talking about. I've seen videos of it. I know of people who've done it. I'm not claustrophobic, but I'm wondering, like, would I get a little claustrophobic in there?
No, because you can keep it open. You don't have to close it. So you're totally good. So yeah, I think you'd love it, actually.
I love the water, and like I said, I grew up swimming in the ocean. I love to do like diving, anything, snorkeling. So the water, I'm very, very comfortable in the water, and I actually find it really soothing. So I'll have to check it out.
Well, because I'm gonna hook you up with a float. So.
Well, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's my pleasure. So it definitely I want to hear what you think of it afterwards. So.
Okay.
Perfect. So Janice, as other than being a writer, you go around, you talk to lots of groups. I know you are a speaker with TEMA. So what are some of the groups recently that you've gone and spoken to?
Yeah, I've been in Antigonish. So one of the TEMA Contra Memorial Trust ambassadors is an advanced care paramedic by the name of John Garth McDonald. Yeah. And John Garth and his lovely wife organize Helping the Helpers Conference, which was recently held in the fall, late fall in St. Yvette's in Antigonish, and that was like a sellout crowd of hundreds of people. And, definitely first responders from all over and their loved ones, members of the government from multiple levels of government were there. And I have to say, speaking of that was very motivating, listening to the other speakers and just seeing what people like John Garth and his wife are doing at the grassroots level in the eastern part of Canada is just so humbling. There's so many people like yourself, Sean, that are devoted to helping other people. So it's an honor to be asked to speak at these events. And when I can, I go and try to talk about my dad. I will always include him in my work and explain to people how passionate I am from my perspective of trying to support people.
Yeah, doing John Garth, awesome guy, great event. I haven't been able to get down there for it yet, and I hope to get down there next year. But definitely lots of people doing good work, and you are among them. So I have a point that I want to make to you, but I need to ask you a couple pre-questions first. So
sure.
Just roll with it. Bear with me for a minute.
Okay, no problem.
When you first started doing this, not as a crime reporter, but when you first started going around and talking to groups and doing these books and talking to first responders, was there ever any trepidation on your part or nervousness on your part, or did anybody ever approach you from the standpoint of the fact that you never worked as a first responder?
Never. I have to say the response I've received, and this is Canada-wide, I speak with people from across Canada, have privately, I received so many messages that obviously remain private between me and those people, thanking me for really when you work on a book like the one that just came out, this is like almost 2 years worth of your time.
Right.
And, I'm not Stephen King. I'm not doing this because I'm going to retire. You can never, to be honest with people, you can never make back the hundreds of man hours that you put into research and writing and editing and then promotion. It's got to be a labor of love.
Right.
And for me, this is my passion project. People who know me well say you're on a mission, and yeah, I am. And it couldn't be further from the truth. The people I have met have been so incredibly grateful and supportive that, someone asked me recently, are you done? And the answer is, well, no, I'm not done because people still need help and support. I will say this piece was incredibly taxing for me to revisit these traumatic crimes that I covered as a very young person. So I'm going to take, I know about self-care more than I used to.
Right.
So I am going to actually take a couple weeks off, which I rarely do.
Yeah,
I need some downtime where I always joke with my friends where I can put my fuzzy socks on and my pajamas and shuffle around and, decorate the house and watch Christmas movies. So I'm going to do that, Sean, and that's important for people to hear this message. It's not just about me. This has really nothing to do with me. It's that other people realize that they have to give themselves a little break too. It can get tough.
Absolutely. So now, but did you ever internally, like the first time you went to speak in front of a group of first responders, did you ever feel nervous because of that?
Oh my, Sean, every time.
Yeah.
Every time.
Okay.
I was nervous before talking to you. I was out this morning talking on global television.
Yeah.
Before this book came out, I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. You feel like vomiting. Yes, of course. I have huge fear of it. Huge.
So, but here, I have something I want to tell you. So just because, and hopefully you've been told this before, and I'm not the first one to tell you this, but if you ever feel like, I know there's nervousness in general, but if you ever feel like, maybe you shouldn't, like maybe you aren't the person to be in front of this crowd at this point in time, or I don't know if you've ever felt like that, but if you ever do, I want you to listen to what I'm about to say to you, okay? This movement, this mental health, mental illness movement to destroy stigma in general, but specifically focusing on first responders and how mental health and mental illness affects them and how they can get better. That movement requires a couple things. First thing it requires is first responders themselves who are willing to put themselves out there to tell a story or to tell their story or to talk about it at all. That's the first thing it needs. And we're usually pretty good at social media. We can put out a Facebook post. We can get things done like that. But there's a very essential, critical second part to that. You need people with a specific skill set. And the skill set that is most critical to this movement is yours. A journalism skill set. Someone who has media experience, has been there, knows how to write, knows how to talk to people better than we do, and can get our message out to people, because without that, this movement doesn't grow. And what I want to say to you is that none of this, my podcast, the work that, how Tema has grown, I've Got Your Back 911, all these movements, there's only so much they can do themselves to grow. They require people like you to be part of the group in order to grow to the point they need to. You are essential. You can't put a price tag, and I'm sure Vince feels the same way, I don't mind speaking for him here, of just how essential your skill set is. When I think of Canada, and I'm sure there's people that I haven't met yet, but as far as journalists go, in this movement, I think of only two people right now, and I'm sorry for anybody else. I think of you, and I think of Michael Landsberg, because of the vast experience you have in journalism, and the fact that we would not have been able to get to this point without that skill set. So I sincerely want to thank you, and I don't know if you truly realize just how important you are to this family.
I am having a trouble gathering myself here, Sean. This is very overwhelming for me.
Well, I want to make sure you knew that. It's important that you know it.
Well, you've actually reduced me to tears, so I'm glad people can't see me, because I've got up early this morning to go to Global Television, so now I'm crying my makeup off, but that's okay. You know what? Here's what you have done for me. There are times in your life where you feel really kind of not beat down, but tired out.
Right.
And you just put the wind back in my sails. So thank you for that. Not just what you said,
it's the truth.
but the reaction from me, and I will go away and think about what you've just said, because there are times you go, you ask yourself, why am I doing this? And this piece was really difficult to do. You just answered that for me. So you have put the wind back in my sails, and I will be eternally grateful for that. So thank you.
Oh, it's 100% my pleasure. I'm blessed to know you. So, and to be able to talk to you now twice on the podcast. Now, my last sort of journalism question for you is this. As a journalist yourself, you're the expert in this field. How are we doing as a movement? How would you say we're doing, and what are some things we need to do, or what's one thing we need to do better?
Well, to be honest with you, I've been really impressed by the members of the media with the reception of this book. And, there is some, not harsh criticism, but there are definitely some very sharp and pointed questions raised in the legacy letters.
Right.
And I wondered how the media would respond to that. And they've actually been incredibly supportive. So I think people are getting it now, and they want to be part of the conversation. And I think that speaks volumes across professions. So, take my profession out of it. I do think, back in the day, my dad never sat around talking about this sort of thing with his peers. It just wasn't done.
No.
So I think we've certainly come a long way. But if you do truly follow the news closely, there are definitely stories where people come out at their profession and say they have PTSD or they seek help, and that they may be pushed back down by that, or they are forced on the fringe, or they're worried about losing their job or whatever.
Right.
We see these stories and we hear them. So, we can't pretend it's running through fields of daisies here. The reality is there is still a lot of work to do. So yes, I think, we've certainly, since I put that first book out, which each piece is about 2 years worth of work, so we're talking 6 years ago now, there is definitely a big difference in the last even 6 years in Canada. But I would say we can't let our guard down now. We have to keep pushing, because there are definitely people who will be listening to this podcast who are thinking, but what about me? If I come out, I'm afraid about losing my job, or I'm afraid that people are going to think I'm not strong enough to do my job. And we have to be worried about them today. So we have to be cognizant of that and be respectful of them, and we continue the conversation on whichever front we can, united. And I think your point is, and I am really humbled by what you said, but it's your message is really, really well taken. Nobody can do anything alone, Sean. Nobody can. So if we don't come together on whatever front that we represent and do our part, then, I think that we're failing as a group. So as long as we keep coming together and we try to keep pushing it forward, then that's all we can do. Today we're doing what we can, and then tomorrow we're going to get up and we're going to do it all over again. Is it exhausting? Yeah, it's exhausting.
It is.
But you do have to be able to say, okay, I like what I'm going to do. In a few weeks, I'm going to take a couple weeks off. Right. And I'm going to reflect on everything that's happened in the last number of weeks. And I'm especially going to reflect on what you've just said to me, which truly is one of the biggest gifts I've ever been given in my life.
Oh, well, no worries. I'm lucky to be able to have the opportunity to give it. So, very well said. I agree. I think that we're doing good work. I think that we're in the right direction. Obviously, a lot of work left ahead of us. I totally agree with you, and I'm happy with our progression so far. Janice, if people want to get a hold of you or see where they can get your books or learn more about you, how can they get in contact with you on social media?
The best thing to do, I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you just look up my name, Janice Landry, JANICELANDRY. But I have a website, which is, again, my name. It's www.janicelandry.ca. Everything's there. My background's there. The other work that I do, there's an email contact for people, for story ideas, that kind of things.
Right.
So, anytime people can check out the website. You can buy the books right from there. All my books are at Chapters and Kohl's and any of the bookstores in your community. People
and
can
it's
go.
Christmas time. We're coming up to Christmas. You need, you need some gift ideas.
I've got some signings coming up. All the signings are all there on the website, and I'd love to see folks. At the signings, it's really special for me because people tell me stories at them. They'll come up and say, I'm so-and-so, I do this, and I love to hear the stories from people when they come up to me in public. It means a lot to me.
Oh, absolutely. I bet it does. We'll get all those links added to the guest area on the UpTalk website. Janice, if there's someone listening right now who is struggling, what would you say to them as a short message?
My main message, especially to the families impacted by trauma across professions, is that we genuinely care about you. Especially for older cases, like I'm talking about unsolved crimes, we care about you. We have not forgotten. And together, we are in this. So you are not alone.
Perfect. Well said. Janice, thank you. Again, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed our chat.
Yeah, I won't forget it, Sean, because of what you said to me. I mean it. I'm never going to forget it.
Well, I kind of, I was looking to hopefully sideswipe you a little bit, and because I really wanted to
you got me.
I wanted you to understand, clearly where your position is in this. So, and that's what I wanted to do. So again, my pleasure, and until we talk again or see each other again, which I know we will, and actually I'm going to hook you up with a float too, so we want to hear about that, but until then, just continue keeping on and take care of you and yours, and all the best. You know how I feel about you.
Thanks a lot, Sean. I know I'll see you again soon too. Now I have to go change my shirt because there's makeup that I've cried off all over it, so
that's not
I'll
good.
go, oh no, it's all good. It's all good. It's happy tears. So thank you, my friend, and it's an honor to be on your podcast. Keep up the great work.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And with that, we put a pretty little bow on this year of UpTalk Podcast. It's been a challenging year for me. I found it really difficult at times to schedule my time appropriately and to have good time management to get these podcasts done, as well as my own struggles this year with my PTSD. They proved to be quite difficult. However, I did get through it, so I'm happy about that. And I know that we're on to bigger and better things, and so are you. I want you to know that. I'm very appreciative of everybody who listens to this podcast. Thank you very, very much. It is very humbling when someone I don't know comes up to me and tells me how they listen to the podcast, I'm always taken back by that. And I don't think that'll ever change. So thank you very, very much for listening and for supporting me and for sticking around. Because I know that at times there have been long waits in between podcasts, and I apologize for that. But I can assure you, I got these out as best I could this year. And I'm happy with what I put out. I think we had lots of great conversations. Let me know what you thought. I would love to know that. Also, you'll notice recently, in the last couple weeks, I've started to put out little short Facebook videos called UpTalk Raw. And these are just little short videos expressing my opinion on a certain subject, mostly to do with mental health and or first responders. Basically, it's just to jumpstart a conversation that I hope will be continued in the comments of the video. And I want everybody to have their say and give their opinion and really keep the conversation going, because we have more work to do. We have lots more work to do. I have learned a tremendous amount these last 2 years and 20 episodes. I've gained an education that I can't put a price on, talking to many interesting people, learning some valuable insights and some valuable skills from my guests. I thank them very much for that. So we're going to shut things down for the rest of the year. We're going to ramp things back up in the new year. Got some things on the go, which I can't really say yet, but it's exciting, I can tell you that. But I'll tell you more about that in the new year. So until I speak to you again, please have a great Christmas season. And if you don't celebrate Christmas, but you celebrate a different holiday, I hope it's equally as fantastic for you. And if you don't celebrate anything at all, well, I still hope you have a great time. Until we meet again for another chat, take care of yourself and each other. More love, less judgment.
'Cause we ain't superheroes, we're just ordinary people trying to make a difference and the first on every scene. And it's a heavy, heavy burden to carry all this hurting when you can't unsee the things you've seen. It keeps going on. When those sirens are gone, it keeps going on. When those sirens are gone.